China just announced something massive. Zero tariffs on all products from 53 African countries, basically the whole continent. While Washington, the American government, imposes crushing tariffs and cuts vital aid programs because often African countries don't do what the US wants them to do, and politically or foreign policy wise, they detract, and then US cuts the aid to them, basically sucking the continent dry and then sort of giving back maybe 10% with strings attached as a sort of weird puppet master. While America operates in that way, which it always has done, it's not a surprise to those who know, but Beijing, the Chinese administration, is acting differently. They're rolling out the red carpet for African nations. And it's not just about trade between China and Africa. It's about respect and partnership and Africa's economic future. Now, I don't want to hit you with the Western spin, as you guys know. It's in my bio. But I'm not also here to give you the Eastern spin. I'm not blindly pro-China, contrary to what many people think. I'm not saying China's a saint of a nation, but I am here in this video to help you understand or help share what I think is an important point, which is often missed, especially is not touched on at all on, in fact, in Western media with their stupid Western spin. Culturally, China is not an imperial power. They operate different to how the US and the great powers of Europe before the US, how they operated. China, actually, let's talk about the US first. They are an imperial power. They are a colonial subjugator in many ways. Whereas China rules China. China has one military base outside of China, that's it. The US, on the other hand, rules or tries to rule the whole world, right? China's people rule themselves. America had to all but wipe out the natives on their own continent and then save the rest of humanity. That's how they want to rule, basically the whole world, right? They have a manifest destiny culture. By the way, bear with me, my American viewers, bear with me. I'm not hating on you guys. I'm just telling you how the administration works and how the American government culture has been for the, as soon as America was a country, really. They have this manifest destiny. You may have heard that term before, which is basically this idea that we are the enlightened and we have to save the rest of the world. So the difference in culture is why China can afford African countries respect and treatment as partners, whereas the US often talks down to countries on a diplomatic, geopolitical level, expecting that America will be put on a pedestal even by countries that really should not put America on a pedestal. There's no reason to, right? It's just a culture difference. So I wanted to point that out. Now back to the topic of this video. What all this means, this China tax-free for the African continent trading, what all this duty-free access to the world's second largest economy means is, first largest economy by some metrics, is that nearly every African country except Eswatini has no tariffs if they want to trade with the very wealthy, even more wealthy in the future, likely developing Chinese market. Why Eswatini? No one really knows why they aren't included in this tariff-free Chinese policy. I'm joking. Eswatini is excluded because they recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country. Funnily enough, even the US does not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country. So yeah, do with that what you will. Now, this move affects everything from Kenyan coffee to South African minerals, opening unprecedented market access worth billions. China has a growing middle class, China's middle class is larger than the entire American population. Ooh. And it's set to only get richer as the Titan of Asia develops further, because it's not a plateaued advanced economy like the Western world. It's a developing economy, which means it's got a lot more headroom. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is doing the exact opposite of China. They've slapped reciprocal tariffs on Africa as high as 50% on countries like Lesotho and Madagascar. South Africa faces, for example, a 31% tariff rate on all its exports as a blanket tariff to America. Ouch. Now, these aren't small numbers. It's like economic war being waged on the receiving countries, receiving of these tariffs. But America first, right? America first. So it doesn't matter if Africa suffers. It doesn't matter if they can't trade as easily, as smoothly with the wealthy American economy. You come to our citizens, you want to sell stuff to us? Tariff. And now I know how tariffs work. It's not actually paid by the country that's exporting to America. I know that. But you have to remember, if a country exports to America and there's tariffs, then American importers will reduce the quantity they are buying from the foreign country, which means the foreign country then suffers because they're being able to sell less, right? But then African countries, after America first is imposed, which it is, African countries, of course, can also turn around and say Kenya first, Ghana first, South Africa first. Why not? Nigeria first, no? We can do it as well, eh? Sorry. American damage in Africa goes deeper than tariffs, though. Washington has gutted USAID, cutting over 80% of program funding that provided life-saving healthcare in some cases, education in others, and infrastructure support across the African continent. Countries like Ethiopia, which received 1.7 billion US dollars in aid a year, now face massive funding gaps. Not military aid like Egypt or Israel or Jordan, but aid nonetheless. Now they're left with a hole where there was US funding before. The US has also imposed severe restrictions to visas being issued to African nations, making it nearly impossible for their citizens to move from, for example, countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, Somalia, traveling into America. I wonder why. Is it because they're Muslim? I don't know. China's approach is fundamentally different, right? And that's why I mentioned this culture thing before, so that you understand the context. America has this imperial manifest destiny, act the way we want, we're the puppet masters idea. China doesn't do that. China says, here's a deal. We want you to make sure we benefit from it, us the Chinese. Also, if you benefit from it, great for you. Let's sign, let's mutually benefit each other. Otherwise, it's a non-interventionist policy by China. They're non-interventionist, meaning you govern yourself how you want. I don't care. Your foreign policy is your foreign policy, right? But let's make a juicy deal together, right? That's how China operates. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, or One Belt, One Road, it depends on how you translate it from Mandarin, Beijing builds roads and railways and airports and transforms African economies. Now I understand, they don't always do it in a perfect way. There's debt to be repaid if African nations struggle and their economies didn't advance as well as they thought after these infrastructure projects. They might struggle to repay their debt. But historically, from what has been shown, from what I have seen, China has mechanisms in place to repackage the debt, renegotiate the payment plans. So this is nowhere near, first of all, it's nowhere near as puppet mastery as the Western model, and it's certainly not colonialism. Lots of people have labeled China's economic investments into Africa as neo-colonialism, like new colonizing. I don't think you understand what colonialism is then, if you think that's the case. If you go to colonized countries when they were colonized, compare it to China funding Africa and then expecting debt repayments. Bruv, it's not the same, okay? Now, while America lectures about governance, how to rule, how to govern democracy-wise, how to, manage your government's management structure, China instead delivers tangible infrastructure that African citizens use daily, African businesses profit off daily. The contrast couldn't be starker. China offers partnership and market access, while America offers penalties and isolation. African leaders are increasingly seeing that choice and picking the obvious one. When one partner builds your infrastructure and opens their markets, while the other imposes tariffs and cuts aid, the decision becomes very simple. This shift represents more than changing trade patterns. It's a realignment of global power that could define the next century in international relations. I don't know what accent that was. Something from the African continent. The African continent is rising. And a lot of people, by the way, sometimes say, Mafuz, you sound South African. Have you been there? I haven't. I think why I sound South African is because I've got a weird accent. Like it's not clear-cut Indian. It's definitely not clear-cut posh British. It's not Cockney. It's a bit of a mix. And South African accents are a bit of a mix, I've seen. It's kind of like hit and miss when it comes to alignment. Anyway, the African continent is rising, and aligning with China seems more beneficial to many of the countries. More Africa first is what countries are getting, is what countries are concluding these deals with China allow them to do, become Africa first, rather than aligning with America and make the African country America first. It doesn't vibe well. No hate on my American peeps, but Africans have to do what's good for Africans, no? And that might mean moving away from the American administration and the sort of shoddy controlling deals that are natural, that are naturally part.